Welcome to the first session from RSCM Publications. My name is Tim Ruffer. I'm Head of Publishing at the Royal School of Church Music, in which role I coordinate our Sunday by Sunday magazine. This session is looking at issue 92 of Sunday by Sunday, which started on the 28th of June, just a few days ago, and finishes at the end of September. Our main focus will be on music for choirs with limited resources, including suitable music for the time of year, and will be joined by two colleagues who have long experience with Sunday by Sunday: David Ogden, who chooses the anthems and psalm settings, and Peter Moger, who, for a time, chose the hymns and then provided us with liturgical guidance. We will be looking at some of the anthems which are particularly suitable as either virtual anthems or, as we start returning to church, anthems for reduced forces. We have made each of the pieces we look at today available in special virtual choir editions. They provide the music in PDF format, which can then be passed around to all your choir members. Each PDF has embedded in it a full performance, backing tracks, and a click track. We give you directions on how to put together a virtual choir recording in these editions, but if you would like further guidance, we will shortly be running a webinar on the subject. Order details of the virtual choir editions will follow at the end of this session. Now I'm joined by David Ogden, who chooses the anthems for Sunday by Sunday. And David, you've been on the Sunday by Sunday committee since its inception, I believe.
Yes, so back in 1997, a group of us got round the table. There was Robin Sheldon, Jeff Weaver, John Henderson, Ian Forrester and myself. And we thought about how we could service the needs for this new lectionary that was going to come in. It was so new that it didn't have a name. We just called it CLC 2000. And so from the very first edition, we chose anthems and hymns, organ music and chants and music from my own and Taizé community based on the ASB lectionary and also on this new CLC 2000 lectionary.
Your task is to choose the anthems and the psalms. With the anthems, are there any basic principles that you have when you're choosing them?
Well, we try and get a broad range. So there's music that can be sung unaccompanied, music can be sung in unison, in 2-part, 3-part, 4-part, and also we know that a lot of cathedrals use this resource, or they do now, and so we like to include music that is more advanced, more in several choirs, has a great number of divisi parts. This is actually the first. This is number 1. I think this is quite a rare specimen. There's fewer of these than the Magna Carta. And this, you can see, initially we chose from about 30 anthem books. Now we choose from about 150 publications. So you can see how we've, in 92 issues, we've expanded the scope. But I try and choose music which reflects the mood of the readings. Unlike ASB, the readings for common worship, there's 2 strands, one where the readings are continuous and one where they're related. And it's finding, if you like, a theme, which is not always the same. And somebody might pick a different theme from those readings. So I'm guided by the comments, which are provided by a different person each issue, and to try and tease out, if you like, the theme from the readings. And I mean, obviously there's a lot of settings of scripture and of psalms and things, but it's the hardest thing is when there's more contemporary issues, or for instance, things like justice, things like creation, things like the environment, but also subjects like healing, which are very obviously very present in the Gospels. Lots of composers love writing Old Testament texts. You're using Old Testament text, which is and obviously the purpose of this lecture is it's more focused on the Gospel reading. So and so it's just matching those up, which is sometimes a challenge, but we get there in the end, and hope to represent music across the centuries.
This issue has special articles on creation, and we feature a hymn by Shirley Arena Murray in it, "Touch the Earth Lightly," and I think it was while the magazine was being put to bed that she actually died. So it's rather poignant that we included it. But you've done a special arrangement of this hymn, haven't you, as a sort of hymn anthem, and I really like what you've done with it, not least because there's an inherent problem, if you like, with the hymn, in that the second verse is very different in its meaning to the first, and so you're sort of you've got this quite nice jolly first verse, and then straight into a much darker theme for the second verse. And the way the tune has been written, of course, you go from the major to the minor very quickly before anybody's had a chance to sort of get used to the melody.
Yeah, should I just show you that? Actually, it's because the melody is by Colin Gibson, who's from New Zealand, as was Shirley Arena Murray, and it's quite a very simple kind of flowing melody. Quite, if you like, folk song. And so it has a connection with people. But as you said, in the second verse, it goes down to the minor mode. And Shirley Elena Murray describes the first verse as advice. So touch the earth lightly, use the earth gently. The second verse is a confession. And then in the third verse is hope and petition. But in the second verse, as you said, in that minor bit, it's about the warnings of how to protect the environment. We who endanger, we who create hunger, agents of death for all creatures that live, which is not very positive, and it's quite challenging. They're quite challenging words. So I thought you need a bit of time to settle into the positive bit before, if you like, questioning our behaviour. So I started it, yes, with a solo, which can be sung by a soprano or alto or tenor or bass, really. The original, and in fact, this is in the original is in the Ancient and Modern, the New Ancient and Modern Hymn Book. It's in B flat, but actually, I felt that was a bit high for some singers. So, and I think A major is a positive key. And then obviously A minor is much more kind of more contemplative key. So hopefully we've successfully got that transition. So the solo comes in first, and then everybody comes in unison, and then we move on to the second verse. Then the third verse goes back to the major, let there be greening, birth from the burning. So there's a sign of hope there, hope and a kind of absolution in that verse. And then the last verse, which I've added a descant to, is a kind of petition for aid, for helping us. God all living, God all loving, God of the seedling, the snow and the sun. Teach us, deflect us, Christ reconnect us, using us gently and making us one. So they're very, very strong, direct words. And I think I've marked it quite strong with a descant. And then this is a little coda at the end. Using us gently and making us one. And I think it's a piece which could be sung at harvest time, or it could be sung. In fact, the reason behind doing this issue was because originally in November, there's going to be the COP26 conference in Glasgow. And so that's now been postponed to next year. But it's kind of, there's a really strong focus, people thinking about the environment. And in a way, by singing this, you're kind of, making sure we don't forget about thinking about the environment, with everything else that's going on. And this could be sung unaccompanied, or it could be sung just by a small group of singers. It's a really nice tune, and I hope it provides an effective arrangement, and people find it useful.
Of course, in these weird and wonderful times that we live in, the chances of us being able to sing in an actual building, especially at harvest time, might be a challenge. But
yes,
certainly, if you have an outdoor space, it might be possible. And of course, if we're talking about creation, perhaps that's a really good thing to do, to have a service outside, so that you can really praise the creation in which we live. And so, do you think that would work in that environment?
I think so. I think it's strong enough. I mean, you might have to sing it more in unison, but I think I think it would be very strong. Obviously, before churches were built, people did sing outside, and so that unity can come through what you're singing, and also the birds might join in if you're lucky. And I think you could have a really great and deep meaning for everybody singing outside. And if the weather's good, if the weather's not, it's a bit more of a challenge. As long as you've got some pegs, you're okay when you're singing outside, or if you've got music. Make sure you get enough pegs. That's my advice.
Okay, yeah. And mow the lawn so you have good social distancing.
Exactly. And I'm sure many people have been on pilgrimage where they've been to kind of Glastonbury. I remember doing some services there at Glastonbury Abbey in the ruins there. It's very poignant, but it's also very meaningful. Yeah, it's kind of almost that connection with the buildings, but also connection with the natural world outside.
One of the anthems that is actually crops up twice in issue 92 is one of your own.
Oh, right, okay.
Go Forth and Tell. And that also has a kind of sort of almost like a hymn feel to it. In fact, the words, of course, are a hymn, aren't they? And we've got a recording of this, which has been recorded by the choral scholars at St Martin's in the Fields, which we'll play in a bit. But perhaps you could tell us a little bit about Go Forth and Tell.
Well, this was written in 2005 for an RSCM course in Bristol Cathedral. Every year they had a post-Easter course with about 100 children from all over the Southwest. And I found that actually they like singing kind of strong music. There was a lot of, we sing a lot of reflective pieces in our liturgies, mainly because we normally sing at communion. And this was right at the end of the final service, so it was a kind of sending out. Often people are sent out during the organ voluntary and the chatting starts and all that kind of stuff. But I almost wanted it like a kind of choral voluntary, if you like. And it picks up the theme of, the end of the service, go in the peace of Christ, to serve the world. And the words are very strong. They're by James Seddon. Go forth and tell, O Church of God, awake. It's got some good, quite emphatic words. Church of God, awake. Church of God, arise. Which kind of, want to spring out of church, but they're strong words. And just to use a kind of octave leap, go forth at the beginning. Fanfare nature about it, and I wanted that real spring in the step for that piece. There's the third verse, sorry, the second verse is more reflected. Go forth and tell God's love embraces all. He will in grace respond to those who call. And then how shall they call if they never heard the gracious invitation of his word? And then I go up at the end. That's a sort of question. There's actually gratuitous descants in this piece, which you don't have to sing. But there's actually a descant on verse 3 and verse 4. I think we had some enthusiastic sopranos that year. This again would work quite well outside as a kind of sending song, but also as an anthem which the choir could enjoy singing, I think. And it finishes with a really strong amen. Enthusiastic statement of faith, I think, those words. And yeah, it's been nice to revisit that piece from what was quite a long time ago now, but it's good.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of choirs are having to do things virtually at the moment. We're making this available for people to use as a virtual virtual anthem. So we have a PDF that you can download and send to your choir members. And on that PDF, there are links to the full performance by St Martin's in the Fields and backing tracks and click tracks. So I think, it's a very, it sort of has almost a marching feel to it, doesn't it? There's sort of marching off to spread the gospel. So I think it'll be quite it's a very useful thing for choirs that that are maybe not used to doing virtual choir productions. They'll find this quite easy to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to, when you're doing these virtual things, you've got to know where the beat is. And if you like, the more martial it is. I was chatting to somebody who was doing these virtual things with an orchestra, and it said orchestras have to decide whether it's the beginning of the beat, the middle of the beat, or the end of the beat. But I think something which is more martial to hopefully be easier to sing. In fact, one of the good hymns to do is For All the Saints. Again, that has a kind of that martial idea. Anyway, well, I hope that's useful. I hope people will adapt it and just have a go and see what happens.
Okay, thank you very much, David. We'll have a chat later on, I think.
Oh yes, fine, excellent.
Okay, see you in a bit.
Cheers.
Jesus, Savior, Lord.
Right, well, I'm now joined by the Reverend Canon Peter Moger. Are you still a Canon, Peter?
I am indeed, yes. That's the last thing the Archbishop did before I left, was to make me one, yes.
So is that a sort of an emeritus, or?
It is, a Canon Emeritus at York, yes.
Okay. And Peter has a long involvement with both the RSCM and the Sunday by Sunday magazine. I think you were on the committee from quite an early stage, probably not quite as early as David Ogden, but a couple of years after. What were you doing initially for Sunday by Sunday, Peter?
Yes, I joined the committee in 1999, and David had already been on it for a couple of years at that point. And they wanted somebody to come on the team and be responsible for choosing the hymns for the weekly hymn lists. So my job at the time was as presenter at Ely Cathedral, and I can't remember how it happened really. Now I think somebody must have phoned me up and said, would I be interested in doing it? And I said it was the sort of thing I enjoyed. So yes, I did. Yeah.
Certainly when I joined the committee in the early 2000s, your responsibilities had moved more to sort of the liturgical oversight of the magazine. Can you remember anything about that?
Yes, yeah. So that really came about. I moved in 2005 from a parish ministry where I was in Cambridgeshire to a job working for the Liturgical Commission in London. And part of my brief was to form links with, as it were, para-church organisations that promoted good worship, the RSCM being one of those. And it was decided that I could spend some of my time legitimately working with the Sunday by Sunday team in a liturgical capacity, and which worked. It was a very good arrangement for everybody, really.
It was indeed, and I know we took advantage of your ability to book us rooms in Church House for our meetings, which was very useful.
That's right. Yes, it's a good venue in central London. Yeah.
The last time you and I met, I think, was probably over a cup of tea in a tea house in York, when I was asking you about thematic ideas for festival service books. We produce a festival service book every year, and you had indeed provided the liturgy for 2 or 3 of those, and you suggested wisdom as being a good subject matter. So I remember you saying that, but I don't remember exactly what it was about wisdom that you thought would be good, lending itself for a festival service book.
I think wisdom's always been something that's fascinated me, and it's there very much in the Bible as a strand. There is a whole tradition of wisdom literature in the Old Testament, and then little bits of it get picked up in the New with wise sayings of Jesus. And also St. Paul is very good, and St. James as well, picking up some of those Old Testament strands and running with them. And what really did it for me were 2 things. When I was training for ordination, we had an Old Testament lecturer who was very, very keen on wisdom literature. So we did quite a lot of it, and that's what I sort of got the bug from that. But also I remember going to a service in Durham Cathedral, at which they explored the theme of wisdom becoming incarnate in the person of Jesus, and I was fascinated by this. Very good piece of liturgy, and ever since then it's been a strand that I've tried to draw on wherever I can. And when you said about festival booklets, I thought, oh, actually you could do something around that, because there's enough material there to look at it scripturally, but also in terms of the gift of wisdom for us as people who live in the world today.
And of course, one of the pieces that is included in Where Shall Wisdom Be Found is your anthem of the same name, which is a really interesting anthem, because it's essentially just upper voices and lower voices and no splitting of that. And so it's just sort of, it's a really interesting idea. I was just wondering what the, how did that come about? What was it written for? How did it?
Well, it didn't start out like that, actually. It started out as a piece for trebles, or higher female voices. And it was written in response to a request by John Wardle, who was then working for the RSCM, for a piece for the schools festival that was happening every year at that time. And he said, we need a piece for trebles. So I duly went away and wrote this text, set this text for trebles, and that was its first incarnation, really, and it made it from there onto the music list at Ely Cathedral and one or two other places. But then when this opportunity came for a for the festival service book, I can't remember whether it was that you and I had a conversation about something that was basically quite straightforward and singable for upper and lower voices, but I've obviously recast it in that form. And that's the form in which it's now there, out and about. So yes, it is basically a set for unison upper voices, unison lower voices, and then there's an optional solo for a solo high voice at the end.
I think most people that have come across you from the RSCM will of course know you for your liturgy and the great work that you've done liturgically for the RSCM. They may not be aware that I think your first degree actually is in music.
That's right, it is, yes. I did a first degree in music and then went to theology a few years later. And it's always been a joy to be able to combine the two. And I've been quite fortunate that the places I've worked have been places where music has played a fairly large part in ministry. So
would I be right in thinking you've spent time on the organ bench?
I have, yes. Prior to ordination, I was a parish organist and choir director at a parish church in Sussex. I did that for about 3 years, and then was organ scholar at my theological college as well, and did the choir there for a bit. So yes, I'm a bit rusty now, but actually since my last move, I've now taken to playing occasionally for evensong here, which has been a joy.
Going back to your anthem, of course, Where Shall Wisdom Be Found can be found in the festival service book, Where Shall Wisdom Be Found, and we are also going to provide it as one of our virtual choir productions that provide choirs with a PDF and all the backing tracks and click tracks that you need to record it. So we hope you will all enjoy getting to know Peter's lovely, quite mysterious anthem. There's a little bit of mystery about it, isn't there?
There is indeed, yes. I mean, harmonically, it's quite simple, but there are a lot of added notes. And above all, I think that the palette is a warm one. Yes. If you've got an organ with nice swell strings, it's marvellous to be able to use them on this, or even a very quiet diapason that's got that sort of broad, warm sound. I hope that, in a sense, illustrates the text, which is really to be, about the question, where shall wisdom be found? And if you look in the Bible, in the book of Job, where this comes from, there are all sorts of answers. The deep says it is not in me, and so on and so forth. And it goes through, and you have to go through about another 16 verses before you get the answer, which is that truly the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. And it's this business that actually wisdom is something that God gives us. It's a divine gift, and it comes out of the nature of God himself. And for me, that is very much out of the nature of God's love, that God in his love and in his generosity gives us the gift of wisdom if we follow him and ask for that gift.
Thank you very much, Peter, indeed. I'm just about to talk now to David Ogden again, who's going to talk to us about another piece in the Where Shall Wisdom Be Found festival service book, a Magnificat Nunc Dimittis by Philip Wilby, which is another really stunning piece. So welcome back to David Ogden. David, I've just been speaking to our friend Peter Moger about Where Shall Wisdom Be Found, which was the festival service book for last year, and which many choirs will still have in their library. And one of the good things about it is that we have recordings of all the musical pieces on our website. So, you know, it's a useful place to start, and people can get an idea of how the music works. And one of the pieces that I really like in this collection is the Magnificat and Unctimittis by Philip Wilby. Just wondering if you'd had a chance to have a look at it.
I have, yes. It's a very jolly piece. The Magnificat is a very big canticle. It's a very strong words, and this has a real freshness and a real brightness to it. This is an introduction. So real energy, and I think it's this. You can kind of get the idea this is sung by a young woman almost. You know, that it has that freshness and vitality about it. And the piece is in unison throughout, with just a descant at the end for the Gloria. Very straightforward. It could be sung, in fact, the whole thing could be sung by altos, because it goes no higher than D. So you could have, if you've got fewer people in your choir, it would work really well, but it would also work well with a choir that's used to singing 4-part, singing this. It's a very strong piece. The choral entries are, there's several interludes, so you get a chance to have a breather between each section of the text. And the melodic line is very accessible. And Mr. Wilby is very nice. He gives you your cues, or most of them, so you know what note to come in at the beginning. There's a good contrast between the piano bits and his mercy. And then he had show his strength. Okay, really big. Philip Wilby's known for writing brass, strong music, big brassy kind of chords, and he uses, you know, some of those in this piece to really give the loud bits, if you like, emphasis, particularly at the end, which ends world without end. So you could vary the texture in it by having some bits sung by solos or sung by a small group, and then the big bits sung by everybody. So not everybody has to learn all of it, but you could really have a go at that. I think it's very accessible.
I think if you know, when we do start going back into churches and start singing again, it may be that will be much reduced in numbers, purely because of the amount of space that we have in a church. So something like this might be actually really useful for when we do go back, and people really enjoy singing it, I think.
Yes, and I don't think you should, obviously, if Magnificat is an evensong canticle, but if you don't sing an evensong, there's no reason why you can't sing this at a Marian feast, or in Advent, or even a carol service. Or, frankly, I think the congregations will be so glad to hear the choir that they don't really mind what they sing. You know, I think this would be really good, effective anthems as a to summon the troops, if you like, get everybody singing together and enjoying and having a good time, just being back together again.
Yeah, and a bit like your anthem, which we looked at earlier, it has that sort of metronomic feel to it, doesn't it? So yeah. Again, it'll be quite a useful piece for doing as a virtual, virtual canticles.
Yes, the tempo is the same all the way through the Magnificat, and it gets a bit quicker in the Gloria, but the pulse is still fairly, yes, very metronomic, and hopefully would be easier to get hold of in a virtual setting, in a virtual situation. Yeah.
and the Nunc Dimittis, which is, I think, based on the Tonus Peregrinus.
Oh yes.
Again, has
that's why I'd heard it before. That's yeah. No, that's in a separate section of the book, isn't it? I think.
It's right at the back. Yeah.
Here we are. Yeah. Again, it's got at the beginning. It says solo voice, but you could have a group of people singing on that, or you could have everybody singing on it. It's quite solemn, but again, it has that regular pulse. It's very sensual, kind of very almost mystical harmony in that, which I think is really nice. But we're using quite simple. I don't think the organ part is particularly hard. No. But it again, that pulse would work well if you're trying to do that virtually. Yeah.
And the Gloria, of course, is just it's not just it's a return to the original theme in the Magnificat, which
it is. There was one change, but there's just a little extra note in the just to give it a bit of brightness at the end. But yes, the Gloria is the same. Yeah.
So that, I hope, gives our audience an idea of some things that they will be able to tackle. Certainly while we're still in a virtual world, and also as we prepare to move back into churches and start singing again.
Yeah. Well, good luck, everyone. I hope these pieces are useful and that you enjoy singing them.
Thank you very much, David. Good to see you again.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh